and welcome to 9 to 42, the podcast from the team at the Guitar Show UK. Join us for interviews, updates and chat with artists, influencers and those that manufacture the gear that we love. Hello, welcome to 9 to 42, which is the podcast from the guys at the Guitar Show UK. And for the new series, we've kind of gone back right to the beginning. But also we're doing something we've never done before. And I will explain when I've introduced my good friend Jason. How are you, Jace?
I'm all right, mate. How are you?
I don't know if I'm well or not, because you're ripping the piss out of me, and you have been for about the past 5 minutes. So I'm not sure how I actually am, but I'll come round to that in a second. This is new for us, because we're in the same room, aren't we?
Yeah, we've never done this, have we?
We've never done this before. No. You're on a very, very slightly 70s-esque white sort of sofa, aren't you?
I am. It's got the grime from the 70s on it as well.
It's got a whiff of Savile about it, if I'm being really honest.
That's not just the chair.
which is a little disconcerting. But we'll move past that. But we're actually in the same space, which is lovely.
It is. It is. Yes. I think I've only done one podcast in person before. The rest have been over Zoom, and that was Rob Williams, guitar maker, because he couldn't figure out how to get his computer to work, so I had to drive to Wales just to sit in a room with him.
Can you still trust a guitar builder who can't work a laptop?
Oh, yeah, because he's amazing at building guitars.
The other reason why it's kind of going back to the beginning is because I think the very first conversation with 942 we had was with Mike Exeter. And I'm looking at Mike, who looks very comfortable on the 70s sofa with a whiff of Savile about it. And this is one of your spots, isn't it?
What, the Savile sofa?
Well, I was thinking of the room in general,
Yes.
but we can...
Yes, indeed.
Would you like to inform everybody where we are?
No.
All right, fine.
Yeah, we're at Gospel Lake Studios just outside of Solihull in the West Midlands. It's technically Lapworth. And it's really nice. I've done loads and loads of records here. It's a converted granary. And it's just a nice, chilled country place to record records.
And we are but 20 feet from a vet.
Indeed. An equine vet.
An equine vet.
So if we hear the sound of horses neighing or any other country sounds, that's the reason why.
And we thought we'd come back to the beginning for the start of... Is this season 3 or season 4? Season 4, isn't it?
Wow.
We thought we'd come back to the beginning because actually I spoke to you first. You two have never spoken on mic in the podcast, have you? Because it was just me and you last time.
Because the show was on. So I was running the show.
You were being really important.
The most important person in the room.
Trying to burn down the new Bingley Hall, I think, at the time.
Literally spreading COVID,
yes,
to be fair.
You were. Or wasn't it the year before that?
No, it was about a fortnight before it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because the plan was to record some interviews at the show, and then we would begin the podcast series. But then we went into lockdown 3 weeks later or something, which is really funny because I listened to that podcast this morning before I came here, and the two of you were talking about how it's really important to get face to face with people, and it's not the same. and then we spent like 3 seasons of talking to people over a Zoom link.
Well, we were like the musical equivalent of going to whatever races it was at the time, because we were talking about the possibility of something happening, and yet you had gathered however many thousand people together in the room, hadn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, to be honest...
Yeah, it was your fault.
Patient Zero could well have been at the guitar show.
No, because I think Cheltenham was before.
That and a Manic Street Preachers gig.
And that Liverpool match. That Champions League match.
Yeah. The week of the show, so sort of like the Tuesday or the Wednesday before we went to build on the Friday, I got a phone call off one of my exhibitors, and he went, "Have you got hand sanitizer for the event?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll get some," because it wasn't really a big thing. And everywhere was completely... I drove around Birmingham for 4 hours looking for hand sanitizer. There was none anywhere. Got back to my office and Googled it, and 8 litres. I didn't know how much I needed. 8 litres of hand sanitizer turned up the next day, of which I still have about 7.5 litres, because you don't need that much hand sanitizer. No. But the security guys were really confused, because asked them to squirt everybody as they came in.
Mate,
My God, that's beyond.
we're back to
beyond the
Savile,
Call
aren't
of-
we?
It's beyond the Call of Duty, isn't it?
Yeah, Christ.
And they did,
What sort
dutifully.
of contract did they sign?
A really poor one.
Yeah.
Surprised anybody got in the door with that amount of recovery time required.
Is anybody still listening?
It's always worth checking. We've never actually done that, have we? To find out if people listen after the first 4 minutes. So anyway, you were there first.
He's looking at me, by the way.
I'm looking at you, by the way.
Yeah.
You were there first. So we thought we'd come back and actually have a proper chat
Because you
because that
couldn't
was
get Phil X again.
no. To be fair, we did try Phil first, and he clearly he seems
He went...
to have got something more important that he wanted to do.
Well, no, I reckon I probably could because like, Bon Jovi aren't a touring entity anymore, are they?
No.
Oh, have they stopped? Finally stopped.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Is that just down to his voice?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Have you not watched the documentary?
No, I haven't, to be
Come
honest.
on, stay with it.
Yeah, but you could. I mean, honestly, you could have made that decision any point in the last 30 years.
With quite a lot of people, actually.
But yeah, but that documentary is actually very good. It hasn't really changed my opinion of him. There's a bit that's really weird when he's walking down the corridor with Phil X and he's talking about his voice and he says like, if I got everything in my locker, everything, I'll be the best front man in the world. And you're like, that's not really for you to say, is it, John? And there's quite a few other people that might disagree with you. But actually, despite that, at the very end of it, I actually feel genuinely quite sorry for him.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look... Well, what's interesting is they were managed by Doc McGee.
Yeah.
And Kiss are managed by Doc McGee. And both of the lead singers have shredded voices because he just kept them on the road for far too long and going, we can fit in more dates. And they've both completely ruined their voices because of it.
It's quite interesting. It's just struck me now how you know, we think of Freddie Mercury when he died back in 91, I think it was. We think of him sort of locked at that age. He never got the chance to get old. A bit like Lennon. Never got a chance to get old. And we're sort of seeing how these people who are at their prime for so many years, age catches up, wear and tear catches up.
Oh, completely.
I mean, we've got the living embodiment of it right here, haven't we, with Chase?
Yes, that's how a modicum became what's less than a modicum when we're talking about talent. Over time. I'm literally just getting you back.
It's fine.
That was for saying that I'm most like Clarkson.
And Jason and I are sharing Hammond and May between us.
A little hybrid.
Yeah.
HM hybrid.
Yeah.
No, but you're right. I mean, because actually we're now seeing a load of artists deal with the aging process to different degrees, aren't we? And there's been the whole conversation about whether Paul McCartney can still sing or not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been a big thing. But obviously, you've got this. You Stones, big example.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're all in their 70s now.
Well, there's the one that struck me. I was lucky enough to go to Rockfield. A friend of mine, Dave Ehringer, he was producing Roger Daltrey's solo album. This has got to be about 5 years ago, and there was a question as to whether it was actually going to get released because Daltrey was like, I've only ever done The Who. I don't know if the world is ready for me bearing my soul as a solo artist. And he played me this song and I went, it's almost like Johnny Cash. It was like this 70-year-old. You could hear it in his voice because he was allowed to be authentically him. He wasn't the lead singer of The Who on this particular recording.
Yeah.
He was Roger Daltrey. And it's quite interesting the way that if people are allowed to do what they do, it's very different. It's like why I think Robert Plant has been able to maintain an amazing career because he's not trying to be Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin.
I know. Well, you see, I know. Controversially, I really don't like Led Zeppelin at all, and a big part of that is Planty's voice in Led Zeppelin. But I went to see him recently at the halls in Wolverhampton, and he was amazing.
Yeah,
he's singing about 2 octaves lower than in Led Zeppelin.
But what a character to his voice.
Yeah, completely.
And it's a similar thing with Geddy Lee. It's like Geddy Lee is still trying to sing like Geddy Lee, and he's struggling. He barks a lot. It's it's just that thing that they kind of have to live up to this thing that they were, and we're all so damning about it. It's like when Marillion last played. Oh, sorry, when Fish last played, they were having to drop his songs down by 2.5 semitones.
Yeah, it's about 2 tones.
And it doesn't sound like they should.
No, and I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because you've got to the point where artists have effectively stopped growing.
Yeah.
Because if they'd continued to grow, the songs would have changed to suit their age.
Yeah.
I mean, lyrically, a lot of those older men singing those songs is vaguely inappropriate.
Yeah.
But also, they can't do that anymore. And I think, actually, when you listen to the Rick Rubin recordings of Johnny Cash, where he has been authentically 70-odd years old and his voice is cracked and broken. But when you listen to Hurt, which is probably the greatest cover version ever, it's incredibly moving.
Yeah.
To be fair, and it's another Rick Rubin recording around the time, the 2 Neil Diamond albums are fantastic and his voice sounds unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Just him and an acoustic guitar. And we're back to, I mean, your point on Daltrey was it's nice to hear him doing what he probably would naturally be doing now, because you trap people in a 2 or 3 album vortex, don't you?
Yes.
And it invariably covers a period of, I mean, take the Stones. What you're really talking about is you trap the Stones in a kind of a 5-7 year bubble, really, don't you?
Yeah.
And you do the same with most acts. It's a 5-7 year bubble. You push them in, and then actually you're asking them to do that again 30 and 40 and 50 years later. And it's the joke. I remember Jagger doing it on, I think it was Jimmy Kimmel on one of the American talk shows. Of the things he's learnt in 50 years of rock and roll is nobody wants to hear anything from your new album.
Yes.
But the problem is the stuff on your new album is the material you're writing to suit how you can sing at that point in time. So actually, you take Fish as the example. The songs Fish has written, like them or loathe them, the songs he's written later in his career suit his voice the way it is, and he sounds far better on them, and he sounds far more convincing. And to be fair, lyrically, to your point, Jace, they actually are more in keeping with his age and probably his take on the world as well. But we were talking off mic about the trials and tribulations of getting Oasis tickets this weekend, but that's another one. So we're now going to have it again. We're going to repeat the cycle again and take a band that we've trapped in a 2-album vortex. Let's be perfectly honest. Nobody really wants to hear anything other than Definitely Maybe or What's the Story, realistically, and we're going to ask them to dole that out 30 years after its prime. Now, if you can't sing particularly well at the beginning, it probably gives you half a chance 30 years later. But, and if your delivery is a bit like Liam's, you probably stand half a chance of getting away with it. But if you were a good vocalist back in the day...
I like Liam's vocals.
No, but you know what I mean?
I
mean a technical vocalist back in the day, or to the case of Fish, I don't know if Fish was ever a technical vocalist, but he had a particular sound that clearly was all to do with his age at that point in time. And so this is a fascinating kind of, and I don't know how many artists actually can still.
Well, there's an interesting thing with the Oasis that I watched a documentary a couple of weeks ago from a couple of years ago, and it was Noel doing his new album, and he asked Dave Gilmour to play on it because he said, "Oh, I think this would be really appropriate for you," and he spent an hour trying to convince Gilmour to play a Pink Floyd kind of solo. He said, "I'm sorry, Noel, I just don't do that anymore. That's not what I do." And only last night there was a thing came out on YouTube, and it's a mini sort of teaser documentary about Gilmour recording his new album. He's got Steve Gadd on drums and this incredibly beautiful sounding album. And I don't like the stuff Gilmour's done since probably his second solo album, About Face. I loved the Floyd stuff. I switched off from him. Everything he did seemed like it was this waltz time thing. It was just all very boring, and I used to get really irritated. And bearing in mind, Floyd are my favourite band, but I used to get really irritated by the Crosby and Stills or Crosby and Nash like singing along, smiling sweetly at Dave, and it seemed like a bit of a love fest, and it was so boring to me. Whereas this latest album sounds like it's going to be an absolute banger. It's because it's really got some heart in it. He couldn't do what he was doing 30 years ago because it would be a parody. And I think and he's actually said it to tribute bands, you do Floyd. You do that, we're going to go off-road with what we do, because I don't want to do that anymore. And I think that's really quite brave. Nice segue into a Marillion album title there. For clang the dropper there.
Brave, but being a multi-millionaire
Precisely.
is very different
It's
to
easy
be
to be
brave
brave.
and being poor.
Yeah.
That's where it starts to not sound like Marillion, to be fair, as I don't think any of them are multimillionaires, as far as I'm aware.
But it does segue. We were talking about Rick
We're
Rubin.
so good, aren't we?
Well,
We're pro.
We're absolutely pro.
Yeah.
Because you've worked with Rick Rubin.
I was definitely in the same room as him for a period of time, yeah.
Which is why I wanted to ask you about it, really, because I've heard conflicting stories of what Rick Rubin does in a recording studio.
They're all true. They are. That's the thing. He's just, it's like one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, isn't it?
Yeah.
One man's genius is another man's complete idiot. And I go backwards and forwards on him. He's so off road with his methods that sometimes it really works well, and other times it doesn't, and the fans hate it. And I guess it's a semi-diplomatic way of saying he sometimes gets it wrong and he sometimes doesn't. But, who knows?
Yeah.
It was a strange experience. I'm not sure he understood the language barrier between England and America. England, but Birmingham and America. Yeah, there's no doubt, I've said it thousands of times before, there's no doubt the album we did, Black Sabbath 13, wouldn't have been that album had he not been involved. Whether or not it stood the test of time, my jury's not out. I don't think it did. And I don't think he got what the band were about at that point. And he does try quite hard to change things up. He's more known for me as a person who puts together teams and someone who solves problems. That's why Metallica got on really well, because trying to keep Lars and James from killing each other in a studio, you need someone to be the arbiter. But I don't think Sabbath particularly needed that. I think there's almost a little bit too much zen around it all, whereas you got three working class blokes and a guy from California from one of the angriest bands in heavy rock, which, for those that don't know, was Brad from Rage Against the Machine, who played drums. So you've got this very strange thing going on all down by the beach in Malibu. So it was all a bit weird, fun, but it was very strange, because it's like his edict was take your first album and imagine you're following that up. Except that was 40 years ago. You've all had major success. Some of you have been married and divorced a few times. We're now in Malibu, and it's not shithole Birmingham. You've driven down to London to make an album in 24 hours.
Yeah, I always get really frustrated with that, because like Metallica did that. We're going back to the garage. And it's like, well, you can't go back to the garage because you're multi-millionaires. Yeah. In the same programme, in the same film, Some Kind of Monster, Lars talking about his art collection.
Yeah.
And it's like, I can't remember what I thought like 3 years ago, let alone 30 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
And wouldn't it be really awful if you were the same person that you were 30 years ago? A complete lack of growth.
Yeah, it's strange. I think this is the thing. I think he likes to. I remember one of the assistants said, it sounded a bit like Mark Owen, I've got a great idea. He said that Rick would, sometimes just stop everybody mid-take, and he'll hand them acoustic guitars and go, play the song acoustically. I said, well, he better not do that with Tony. He'll get a guitar wrapped around his neck. I mean, what a fucking stupid comment to make. It's like, oh, I get it. He's trying to, make people think differently. Brian Eno did that with the Portsmouth Symphonia. I mean, that's an album everybody should hear. It's like he basically said, everybody who can play an instrument swap. So you've got people who play cellos playing flutes. They know that when they read the dots, that means put less fingers on the notes, but it's not necessarily going to sound great. It was a brilliant experiment, but only from a comedic point of view. The 1812 Overture is incredible. But that's kind of all the way through. I would think, this is going to sound like the Portsmouth Symphony if he starts to do that, you know. Fortunately, they're quite strong-willed, Black Sabbath, so they kind of got through it.
It seems more of an approach to me, and it probably is why it worked well with Cash and worked well with Neil Diamond, that actually probably translates better on a one-to-one basis. Yeah. So I think you know, to be able to say to somebody like Neil Diamond, look, kind of forget what you've become, go back to when you were strumming a guitar and do it that way around, that probably has some merit. Yeah. And actually what you got was a really great collection of songs, and I don't know if the story around it is true or not. I'd like to believe it's true, which is that Neil arrived with a load of songs and Rick said they're not good enough, go away and carry on working.
Yeah, I think he's got a recording on his phone, he just plays that to people when they turn up.
Well,
that's not good enough, do it again.
But you know what? Quite like that. If you're working with an individual, that probably makes a lot of sense.
You know, he's an oddball. He's very difficult to have a conversation with at the best of times. He does care deeply about the project, but he will focus to the point of complete sociopathdom on one person. And that's quite hard to deal with, because it's like, you know, we're all in here trying to have a bit of a laugh, and that's where these guys get their energy from.
Yeah.
And
but with Diamond and Cash, that works fine, because
precisely.
In reality, what's going to happen once the songs are written and who's going to make up the arrangement almost doesn't matter.
No, exactly.
It's going to be a group of very, very, very clever, very experienced session musicians who will know exactly what to do for the particular track. So in that respect, it probably works quite
and that's why I say you can't judge him. And when Jason said, you know, things I've heard about him, they are all true, everything. I mean, he doesn't care what people think of him, which is, again, a nice way for him to be really truthful about things. It's like, I'm going to suggest this, and if you think it's crap, I don't care. I'll go and stand up on my paddleboard and meditate. You know, because he literally is just comes in, does what he feels the project needs, then goes. And he'll come back a couple of days later and kind of give the big thumbs up. Is everybody, how's it going? He's not a producer in the sense of the word that a band would expect. And I think that's a potential mismatch sometimes, because it's why are you engaging someone to be that person in the room? And I don't know the reasons for getting him involved, other than he'd always said he wanted to do a Black Sabbath record.
Well, I would imagine as well that he got that track record by the time he got to 13 of working with artists that have got longevity but maybe aren't quite as popular as they once were.
Yeah.
And has rejuvenated their careers. I mean, Cash was probably bigger than he'd ever been at the point of his death. Neil Diamond, I don't know, never really been a fan.
It got him a whole load of reviews he'd never had before. I opened him up to a totally different audience and gave him probably an air of credibility that... So, I mean, we're in a different place now. I mean, you go back 15, 20 years and we sneered at people like that, and we sneered at ABBA, and we sneered at or certain parts of the music industry sneered at bands like that in a way they don't do now. Yeah. So that would have been we're talking, 2004, 2005 when he worked with Diamond. So at that point, you're probably chasing a bit of credibility, a bit of respectability. And working with Rubin will have given him that.
The thing is, he can say, I watched something last night, and it was, did Rick Rubin ruin Linkin Park's third album? And it was just one of those clickbaity titles. But what was interesting was they were like, we've done 1 and 2. We've done our first 2 albums. We don't want to make this trilogy. They were getting to hate new metal because everybody was on the bandwagon. And when they started talking with him, they had these conversations, and he just said what everybody was kind of needing to hear, which is like therapy, isn't it? They're like, he just said, well, don't do it then. Write some songs and don't be Linkin Park. See what happens. I got his audio book. A couple of people bought me the book thinking it would wind me up. They don't know me. But I listened to the audiobook twice, and the first listening I was like, yep, yeah, that reminds me of the day he walked in and said, guys, if you feel that you're going in the wrong direction, feel free to change direction. And I just went, fucking hell, Rick's been at the fortune cookies again. And then I listened to the book the second time, and I was like, there's an awful lot of stuff that I read that resonates with me that I could take from this. And I guess it's like whatever mood you're in. This is what I've said about it being a therapy thing. It's like when you're ready to hear something, you're ready to hear it. And he's a catalyst. And I think it can be really, really useful. Whether or not it's right that some people will get to the point where they're like, why are we paying this idiot? What's interesting, because this made me giggle, right in the middle, there were still the original 4 members of Sabbath. We were sat at Ozzy's place in California, and Corey Taylor from Slipknot was doing a stand-up show at the time, and someone asked him a question, what was it like working with Rick Rubin? You can all watch it on YouTube. And he goes into this diatribe. He literally annihilates Rick Rubin. And we were all watching this on YouTube. And they're all going, well, he's right. What does he do? And then when you look back and you think about it, some of these albums that have been the artist didn't particularly like have turned out to be real statement albums. It's like that. The Corey Taylor album was an amazing album, or the Slipknot album. It was like these albums are standout. They're landmarks because he's made them do something different. And I think it comes down to not being afraid of telling the person that's in charge of your album that you don't like the way he's going with it. I think that's part of it. I don't think you should be particularly starstruck by someone like Rick. He's obviously very good at certain things. He's got an immense musical knowledge, but you can say no. And I think that's a lot of the time is where people will just do the passive aggressive talking in corners about, they don't like the way it's going. So well, tell him, he'll have to change it. It's your album.
And to your point, if you want to make the same record again, he's probably the worst person to ask to do it.
Yeah, totally.
If you're ready to change, he's probably the best person because he's going to give you the authority to do that. You don't need it. It's your album, but sometimes you do need somebody to say, do you know what? That's fine.
Yeah.
That's
that happened
fine.
with Madonna. She got William Orbit in to do an album. That's got to be around 96, 7, somewhere like that. He said, why are you talking to me? She said, I don't want to make another album. If I wanted to do the same album again, I'd get Pat Leonard back in. We worked really well together. I don't want to do that. And it's like, that recognition is important. I've interviewed for a couple of websites. I've interviewed a few people, and I've asked them what it's like to be kind of let go by an artist. Adrian Bushby, really great producer. What did it feel like when Muse said they wanted to work with Mutt Lange? He went, what do you think? I went, I don't know, that's what I'm asking. It's quite, he actually took the real positive from it. It's like, it's bloody brilliant. They want to work with Mutt after me. Brilliant. And he was still involved, and I think he's done stuff with them since. It's that thing of like, he actually said if they'd carried on with me, we'd have made the same album again.
Yeah.
They wanted to do something different. And I think that's quite a big life lesson.
Yeah, so basically for artists to do the best work, they need to be made slightly uncomfortable.
Stop digging. No, I mean, I like to think I make it quite easy for people. We have a lot of conversations, and my big thing for people is to make them as comfortable and as relaxed as possible to try everything. Until there's sometimes I am sitting in here slightly giggling internally because I have had a walk out of here once because I was so pissed off with the guitarist because he just wasn't doing he literally wasn't shutting up when we were listening to a drum take. on many occasions, and I was just getting really annoyed by it. Generally, I tried to keep it pretty relaxed, and the vibe of that relaxation. That's why this place is lovely. You can kind of feel you're just in a bit of a living room and enjoy the process of it. I don't subscribe to. Certainly when we're recording, being in the room, I don't subscribe to it being anything other than as relaxing as possible. I don't think you should push anybody's buttons, but that's me.
Do you do a lot of pre-production before recording?
Yeah, that was the big thing I was banging on about back in 2020, wasn't it? Always do a load of pre-production with the band. Always do, if you want to get into music, go and do live shows. A bit me in the arse, didn't it, with COVID? But yeah, I do. Yeah, I like to. I like to go down and work with the bands, because you get to know them. Yeah, you've got to work out whether you can be in a room with these people. Normally, it all goes to shit. I had one band who I worked. I flew up north of the border to do some pre-production with them. We got the whole thing sorted. We got a pretty limited budget, so we had 4 days booked in the studio. 2 weeks after we did the rehearsals, had everything sorted, they came down and they completely changed their mind about how we were going to do it. That really did annoy me, because it got to the point where we were just copying their demos. The guy actually had his laptop in the control room going, right, we need to do this part. I went, why don't you just send me the parts? It's pointless just copying them. We're not doing anything new here. You've really chosen poorly. And it's not an ego thing with me. It's just like, it's just wasting everybody's time. What were you trying to do to get me involved? I thought you wanted to reshape what you're doing, but you didn't. So
no, we won't know who that is. You can tell us afterwards. But your social media presence only kind of lists, I'm assuming, the cream of the crop that you've worked
No, they're the
with.
only people I've ever worked with. Nobody else will employ me.
But I'm sure you've worked with lots of others.
Yeah. This is me opening my water bottle, by the way. Yeah.
So, are you in the studio almost all the time?
No.
So what are you doing when you're not in the
Looking for
studio?
work. No, I mean, I do like to keep things a little bit not production line. I think the way I looked at it, there's a couple of times in my life where I've had quite tense mental issues, and that comes from stress and overload and all of that. And I likened it. Sorry, the Gospel Oak Fly is back. I likened it to when you work with an artist where you're in rehearsal room whilst developing songs, because I'll go into songwriting, arrangement, lyrics. I want to know what the story is. I want to know what we're talking about. When you start with that, and in some instances, and I do this with Tony from Sabbath a lot, right from this is a riff I had on my phone kind of thing, all the way through to them taking it out live and me mixing the live show. Not live, I'll do the live recording mix, if you see what I mean. So when you're doing that, I've likened it, if you're going to do 4 albums in a year, you're talking about 40 songs, give or take. You've had to conceive, be in the delivery room with, go through school, university, and the weddings of 40 other people's children. It's bad enough with 2 of your own. It's hard work, and it's like, I couldn't sustain that. I'd really struggle. I like mixing because that's something that can be sent to me. I love working with artists, but there's only so much you can do in a year, in a period of time, because it is mentally draining to do it right. Making a song is fine. I mean, we've both worked with BIM.
Yeah.
So you work with students and they do their portfolio projects, and generally it's like 1 or 2 songs. It's like, now make an album. It's not just 10 times. It's exponential, the amount of work and pressure that goes into putting an album together. I use mind maps. I showed a student once what was going on in his head because I had an album project on the go, and I said, "Yeah, you see how you're doing that?" I said, "Right, bang." I opened up the mind map. It was like Minority Report, and he went, "No wonder I'm overwhelmed by this project." And that's the thing. It's like to maintain that creativity can be quite hard. So no, I like doing other things as well. I do mentoring. That's quite good because that's a way of someone else having to do the thinking and me guide them. I turn into Rick Rubin.
Shoes off, lying on the couch.
Shoes off. I've actually got a photo. I must show you guys that with his microphone. And yeah, it is. It's like feet up, sitting at the back of the room, going, actually, you know, if you did that, and then showing someone. And what's interesting, when you've worked as long as I have, you give one nugget of information to someone, and then you go to tell them something else. Sometimes it's blown their mind that much they can't take that any more information in because you've opened this gateway to Narnia. You know, it's like there's a whole other route they've now got to explore. So it's being mindful of all that and turning it on yourself and going, yeah, don't be so hard on yourself. You kind of probably need a break from that, or, you know, be careful what you take on. So
just wondering what advice you've got for songwriters that are listening to this.
Even those in the room.
yeah.
Well, yeah, for even those in the room.
Well, do you play and sing then, Anne?
I was actually suggesting Jason.
Oh, okay. I don't think of you as a songwriter. Oh, that was a low blow.
It was. Now,
Well, one of us had to say it.
Yeah.
You got there first, so
yes.
Sorry,
But-
carry on.
Yeah, I've lost my thread now.
That's all right. I've opened the floodgates as well, haven't I?
you have really.
I've got to put up my armour.
But
Advice for songwriters
yeah,
who may
advice
be
for-
listening.
yeah, about, you know, how, because obviously if you're in the studio and you're
Yeah.
working with them and you're going, no, you kind of need to do this, that. Is there anything that's kind of, is it taught or is it a gut thing?
What, songwriting?
Well-
I'm being...
Yeah.
What we do, I don't know. I think it's experience. I think it's learning from reactions to situations that have happened in the past. I don't think people can be taught anything. I'm not just being difficult. I think you have to learn it. So I think we're at a time in the world where, I mean, we're surrounded by books here, which is great. And some of us probably can even read them. But we've got so much information at our disposal on YouTube. So if it's like you can watch documentaries on how things. You brought up Some Kind of Monster.
Yeah.
Brilliant, because there's an example of how a band can completely fall apart, how they can be brought back together, how they can pay 40 grand a month to a psychologist and him contribute to the lyrics, all of that stuff. But it's like this isn't Spinal Tap. This is the real world, you know. And it's like bringing experience into a room is one thing. But learning to understand the other person is massive. And I think that's something that, as a self-confessed teenage big-headed Noel, I had to learn. I had to learn to understand what other people want from things, that I may not always be right. And just understanding that dynamic, it's some people still won't try a suggestion because they didn't come up with it. I'm happy to suggest as many things as possible. I don't think I particularly get my arse in my hands if it doesn't go to the final record, because I tend to say, when people are learning, they always think they've got to get the best, I'm going into that, I'm all het up because, I'm really excited, it's going to be the best drum sound I've ever made. It's like, well, if it is, how are you going to beat it? You know, we'll just go in and have fun and make a good sounding record. And I think the thing is, if you've got to approach it with the sensibility that you're going to do your best, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be the best thing you've ever done. Because I'm a big believer in yin and yang, and there's no positive without negative. There's no brilliant without shit. And so we go through life having to have this comparison. And so if you dump the ego, learn to let go of things, you can really learn from other people about what works. You start to see their body language. You start to understand whether what you're doing is making them really uncomfortable. And I'm not that person that would get someone angry to do an angry vocal. It's just not, hire someone else. You know, yeah. I want the person to be so comfortable that the emotion is literally dripping from them. So I think it's just a case of learning by doing, not being afraid to try stuff. I think someone said to me, the best way of learning a language is to actually just go and start speaking it to people who are fluent in it. Dump all the fears and go, I don't care if I screw up. I'm going to learn because they're going to nurture me because I've bared my soul to them. And I think that's like a metaphor for anything that we're trying to do. You've just got to get out of that comfort zone. But the thing that I attempt to do is to make this the inner sanctum. I hate it when people come into the studio who aren't welcome. I think it's very important that you're establishing this very bare relationship with people. We had it in this room once. We had a band came over from Eastern Europe. They were sort of South American by descent, but they live in Eastern Europe. A very political band. I think they're just releasing the album like 2 years later. They came over. They spent 2 weeks recording this album. It was great. The singer and main guitarist's nervousness was palpable. They used to have a singer he'd had to take over, or he had to take over the guitars, whichever. But he'd really had to be nursed into being able to feel free. And even the two guys in the band with him, I had to kind of just gently stop them from criticising him, because he needed to be the person playing these solos, but he wasn't a soloist. He needed to do something melodic, and we coached him and we got him through this whole thing. They were staying at the very lovely youth hostel down near Stratford. It's like a country estate, and they managed to find a local taxi firm to bring him backwards and forwards. And the taxi driver was in a band, and they were too nice, so they invited him in every day. Got to the final evening of recording. The album was brilliant. We did a final playback, and he stood at the back of the room, and I'll paraphrase, he said, "I've basically told you you're brilliant for the last 2 weeks, but my God, you guys need to get a lead guitarist." And I just went, huh. And Baz, who owns this place, and Jaden, who's my assistant, they looked over at me waiting for me to throw something, and I just had my head in my hands thinking, who let this fucking idiot in? Had he been in any earlier making comments like that, he could have destroyed the project. Mm-hmm. I had to talk the guitarist down afterwards. I said, don't listen to anything that guy says, except get out of my cab.
Yeah.
Because he's a taxi driver. He knows nothing. And I thought, that's the thing. You create this environment for people, and it just takes one idiot not to understand that. So I think it just comes down to experience and empathy, really.
If a band sends you a demo, can you like hear in your head all of the different permutations of the ways you can go with that?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I'll certainly have ideas based on 50 years of listening to music. more than 50 years now, sadly. But yeah, definitely, I can always hear what might happen, but I always like to think, what are they actually after as well? Chats are brilliant. Sitting down, there's a band I worked with down in Cornwall. They were very much down the heavy rock, biker rock kind of route. And then one evening, we were chatting, and I knew the bass player loved Rush because he was like Geddy Lee Book of Bass and stuff like that. But he said we somehow got onto Transatlantic, Pete Travis's side project with Mike Portnoy and Rainer Stoltz, and who's the guy from Spock's Beard? What's his name? The singer. Anyway, great band. Seen him at Morse. Neil Morse, that's his name, Neil Morse. Brilliant prog band. And we got onto that, which then followed onto Mastodon. And it was like, oh, these are great. They're like, yeah, we thought about doing this, but we're sort of a bit stuck in what the record company want us to do. They want us to be this biker band. I went, oh, fuck that. We need to go down the Mastodon route. Because Mastodon, I thought, was the name suggests something heavier than hell. They're a southern heavy rock band. They're Atlanta-based, I think. They're fucking brilliant. They use synths, and they're kind of proggy, and they all sing. It's like a real palette. And that was where I saw where they could go. And that happens from time to time. It's like the preconceptions that can be foisted on people by non-knowing executives. I mean, in one sense, I guess that's a good thing that A&R don't have as much say in things anymore.
No, I don't really know what A&R does anymore.
I don't think I've ever known what they did, but yeah, it's a weird one. It's like having someone in control of your career. I mean, you hear horror stories, don't you, throughout the decades where A&R have been sacked, the whole department's been sacked, and suddenly a major artist is under a new department and they've got ideas. It's like, oh, good.
That was because we were talking about Tom Petty earlier. I don't know if it was in the podcast or before, but
it's because I said that Jason sounds like Tom Petty when he sings, and it was very complimentary as well.
But the story is,
well, we've managed to shoehorn it in now.
That he sounds like Tom Petty.
Yeah.
Full Moon Fever.
Mind you, he's dead though, isn't he? Tom Petty.
Yes, exactly. How
I didn't say when he sounded like.
Last Wednesday. Sorry, Jace, carry on. Resent to Jace. Go on, you can do it.
Full Moon Fever,
yes,
the biggest Tom Petty album of all time, was rejected by the A&R at whichever label. It was on MCA.
Right.
And it wasn't until they sacked the whole department that a new A&R, that they went, oh, yeah, we'll release it.
Yeah.
So they clearly know nothing.
It's unreal, isn't it? Who was it? Oh God, yeah. Because I had a resurgence last year. Because my teenage years were the 80s, right? So
and ours,
yeah. So going into the 90s, it was like early 90s, just before grunge took over. It was all sort of the end of the 80s, the euphoria and everything. And there was this band, and I can't believe I'm saying it because it was a Ted Nugent band, and he's a anyway. It was a band called Damn Yankees, and
Damn Yankees
was brilliant. Well, I've just found out they got paid $1 million not to make their third album by the record label. We don't want you. That's not the way the business is going.
Wow.
And because I'm trying to think what the guy's name is, a really good channel on YouTube. All I can remember is the guy sponsored by Zenny Eyewear because he wears these strange glasses. But it's a great channel, and he sort of talks through all this history of bands and stuff. And I was gobsmacked. It was like, wow, probably the right thing, because maybe they wouldn't have done well in '92.
Well, no, they wouldn't.
They were probably winding up contracts left, right, and centre for hard rock acts. In the kind of early Nirvana stage, because the writing was really on the wall, wasn't it?
Well, I saw the triple header of Dave Lee Roth, Cinderella, and Extreme. I mean, that was summer '91. I was like, can it get any better than this?
No, but amazingly, the hole in the ozone layer has
Yes.
built back in now. So, you know,
God.
that was my teenage years. It started with Hanoi Rocks.
Right.
And it just, but they kind of split up by the time that I'd found them. So then I'm already on the second generation of glam bands, really. So yes, Cinderella, Tiger Tails, obviously Guns N' Roses, Faster Pussycat, and I just loved. I mean, God, my hair was fucking massive.
Wow.
There's a lot of backcombing going on in the 80s.
Jesus, I tell you what, I went to see Heart. I saw Heart. I think it was the third gig I ever went to, because people hate me anyway, but they hate me for this. My first gig was Rush on the Moving Pictures tour. Second gig was Genesis, Abacab. Third gig was ELO on the Time tour, so it was still the original lineup. Fourth gig was Queen live at Milton Keynes, which turned into this amazing video prior to the whole Works thing. And supporting Queen were Heart on the Steamboat Annie kind of vibe.
Oh, when they were Heart before the hair.
Teardrop Explodes, Joan Jett, and Queen. It was like, this is the golden time for music. A few years later, I saw Heart at the NEC on the Heart tour. My God, there was some hairspray in that building. It was hideous.
I was reading an interview with the two sisters last issue of Classic Rock, I think it was, and them saying how uncomfortable they were, that they were basically forced to do it by their record label.
Well, yeah, because Nancy said that the producer said, there can't be any acoustic guitar on this record. And she's like, but that's what I do. They play acoustic guitar. I mean, it put them on the map.
Yeah, completely. It was
a bit like Whitesnake.
Was it Ron Neverson?
It was, wasn't it? Yeah. But like Whitesnake, I mean, David Coverdale was some bloke from up north with bad teeth. Now he's some bloke from up north with an American accent and good teeth.
Yeah.
Mrs. Doubtfire.
I don't know how true it is, but on Mick Hall's podcast, he did, I think it was on the Get Your Rocks Off podcast, he was doing an artist a week. He did Coverdale, and he said when he joined Purple, they gave him money.
To get his teeth done.
To get his teeth done, to get his eyes fixed, because he got a lazy eye as well, which is why he's only got sunglasses in on the first year's worth of photographs. And he also bought elocution lessons because no one could understand him because he was from Redcar.
That's it, Redcar. Yeah, and now it's like, here's a song for you.
I love
brilliant.
that about Coverdale.
Do you know what's interesting? There was a brilliant friend of mine, he sends me David Coverdale quotes, and they're all so inappropriate because it's like shit that Coverdale has said. But he put me onto this interview about, it's a YouTube audio kind of documentary, and it's the time when John Kolodner got involved to do something with Whitesnake. And he basically, because John Kolodner, if you've ever seen the making of Pump by Aerosmith, he's this white guy and he sits in the room and he goes, oh my God, I think that is totally Stephen's masterpiece. He's like this monotone. He basically was an A&R guy, but he was the world's first freelance A&R guy. Foreigner didn't know what he did, so his credit was John Kolodner, because he just was him, because he put the Foreigner 4 stuff together and it was like massive.
Yeah.
So he got this thing, he was very responsible for these things, but he's in this documentary and he goes, yeah, he said, I basically looked at Whitesnake and they were a pretty good bar band. Actually, they weren't even that good, but Coverdale was a star. And it's like,
I mean,
out to
be fair, one of the first gigs I went to, it might have been my third gig, was Whitesnake on the Saints and Sinners tour at Birmingham Odeon.
Right.
Where they played 7 nights because the NEC didn't exist then. So they were playing like this 3,000 cap venue for a week.
Yeah.
But it was Colin Bomber Hodgkinson, Mel Galley, Bernie Marsden. Cozy Powell was on drums.
Yeah.
I think it might have been John Lord on keyboards.
Yeah, he was with them pretty much the whole time.
And Coverdale was a star. But when you look at the pictures of them now, they're so deeply unfashionable looking as a band that you realise they were never going to make it.
It was it was sort of Deep Purple side project, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, let's get away from Richie for a bit.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, because Ian Pace joined as well,
Yeah.
didn't he? In fact, was Ian Pace on the Saints and Sinners album and then Cozy did the tour?
Could have been. But yeah, Neil Murray, he was on bass and a couple of them. I mean, it was insane. But yeah, they would never have done anything like that. And then perfect timing. You know, marries Tawny Katane, does the videos, gets the sound of the 80s, really, 80s rock.
Which was basically 70s Led Zeppelin with a synth.
Yeah. And brilliant A&R shit, because it was like, there are about 3 versions of Here I Go Again.
Mm-hmm.
The one that did all the really sort of big airplay, the single, that's Tim Pierce on guitar, you know, playing the solo. It's like, let's get A-listers in to make this album go stratospheric, and it did.
Actually, I was reading this month's issue of Classic Rock, and there's a big interview with Joe Perry, and they were talking about when they were recording Get Your Wings, I think. And Jack Douglas, who was working under Bob Ezrin, but Bob Ezrin didn't really understand them, so left Douglas to get on with it, brought in, is it Steve Hunter, that was played with Alice Cooper and someone else.
Right.
To play some of the guitar parts, because Perry and, is it Whitfield? Brad Whitfield.
Yeah.
Weren't nailing them,
Yeah.
basically. Is that something that you do, that you...
No, I just play them myself. No, I do attempt not to. We have been caught with the Colin Grigson who's playing bass moments. That Colin Grigson is the fictitious character played by Rick Mail in
Bad News.
Bad News, where his bass is replaced. We have had a few of those moments. No, I mean, there used to be a thing about producers bringing session musicians and fire the musicians. It's like the budgets aren't enough. There are no session musicians. You're stuck with what you got. That's always like album lottery, isn't it? It's like, oh, Christ, which one isn't going to be able to do their job? We're okay with drums. We can probably deal with that. Bass, yeah, we'll get away with it. Christ, if they can't sing, we're fucked.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I hate that. But no, I wouldn't replace stuff.
No. Dick Wagner, that was the other name.
That's him, yeah. He played on... well, yeah, because Bob Ezrin did Peter Gabriel's first album, and Dick Wagner played the solo that I always thought was Gilmour on Here Comes the Flood. But yeah, Bob Ezrin, blimey, he's just been doing Deep Purple for the last 17 decades, I think.
Yes, they've just got a new album out, haven't they?
Yeah.
I'm just going to interject at that point for a couple of reasons. One, we've been going for an hour.
Oh, right, okay.
Thank you. I got that. I was with that. One, we've been going an hour, but also, if you're not of a certain age, you've probably switched off by now, because we do have put ourselves into a bit of an early 80s rock loop.
Yeah. No, to be fair, though...
Oh, that's a separate episode.
From podcast analytics, we don't get any young listeners anyway. Youngsters don't listen to podcasts.
Ooh. Now, you see... Ooh, that's only because we're not true crime.
Yes, but I mean...
I saw a murder last night. Were you there? Is that not it? Is that not how it
That
works?
might not be enough. I think an hour and 3 minutes in, I'm not convinced you haven't seen a murder last night.
If we start with, it was a cold, dark night.
Well, that's also every rock album from the early 80s.
That's true.
So that's not helping us, really, is it?
What about...
And you've worked with Dio, so there's a dragon coming along in a minute.
There's a dragon and a rainbow, and Halford will be something to do with Norse mythology.
And not somewhere where you get a bike rack.
No, exactly.
Do you want to wrap it up then?
I think we should perhaps wrap it up, yeah. But I'm liking the free-form kind of vibe of this. I'm loving us all being in a room. It's great.
Yeah, this is the nicest podcast.
Are you going to
I've
leave
done.
this bit in so people know why it's suddenly gone?
Oh, God, I will leave all this in.
Well, actually, the other thing that an hour in that happens is that we're all old and we've all got prostate problems. So there's going to be a run to the toilet going on in a minute.
There could be a bit of that.
And we haven't got radio mics, which is good.
Yes, no, that's fine. There'll be none of that as well. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure. I don't know if we got to any of the things we were going to talk about.
No, I didn't even open my list of things to talk about, really.
We could always get to them and then you can edit them while we're here.
The only thing that I thought was really funny was that when you type Mike Exeter into Google, it's got other suggestions.
Uh-oh.
and it says, people also search for guitarist who has lost his fingers.
Oh, no. Wow. That's, I mean, that is fairly specific, isn't it?
It's
That
very
they're searching for him, but you'd think they'd know who he is.
Yes, to know that
But
he's lost his fingers would suggest you know what you're looking for.
Yeah. Who are they talking about?
Django.
Oh, yeah, that's true. No, he burnt himself badly, didn't he? What about him?
Oh, no, I didn't click on the link.
No, I wouldn't either, because I wouldn't know what I was going to find.
Perfume, that's what you'd find. That is really top on Google.
Is it?
Whoever's done the SEO, when you type in Tony Iommi, you get a lot of perfume.
Yeah, the funny thing was we watched, because Tony watches YouTube quite a lot, and he watched the one with where Lee Anderton and Danish Pete were reviewing one of his guitars. And Anderton's there, and he's got his phone, and he goes, I just thought I'd do a quick search, see what's current with Tony. And he goes, oh, he's launched a perfume with this bloke called Jerkoff. And that was it. And, yeah, it's actually Zerjoff. Yeah, it's weird. There's been 2 perfumes now, both of which are too strong to have in a confined space.
Yeah, it was funny because I think I told you this when we met for coffee a couple of weeks ago. But when I worked at the NEC, the HR director actually lived by Tony,
And he could smell him.
he said, and he could smell him in the supermarket. It was Sainsbury's. They both used to go to Sainsbury's.
Oh, brilliant.
And he was like, you get this waft of like lavender and patchouli or something,
And leather.
and it'd go, oh, Tony's down this aisle.
Yeah. Well, bet it wouldn't be Sainsbury's nowadays.
Waitrose.
Yeah, it's got to be, innit? Delivery.
I think we should wrap it up there.
I think we should absolutely wrap it up there. I'm wondering if the actual cost of this in terms of damages is worth putting it out. But we'll make a decision on that.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you very much. It's been lovely.
Really good fun.
Thanks for listening to 9 to 42, the podcast from the team at the Guitar Show UK. If you've enjoyed the show, then please remember to hit the subscribe button and share with other like-minded souls. For more information about 9 to 42, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram at the Guitar Show UK. This has been an A Short Stories production. Hello and welcome to 9 to 42, which is the podcast. Oh, well, fuck right off then. Just fuck right off. I mean, honestly, what is the point?
Hello, Anne.
I'm going to start again.
Hello and welcome to Therapy for Me.
Yes, well, there's that as well.
Monday.
I'm going to be
stuck in a studio with 2 twats.
Monday.
Oh, yes, we must listen to next week's because we'll get that.
Monday. Yeah.
Monday.
What can I say about Monday?
I thought I'd sit in the car while I was doing this.
Yeah.